Welcome to another edition of Head On here on Shaw TV, examining the issues that really matter across mid-Vancouver Island. Happy New Year. Thanks for joining me for another edition of Head On here on Shaw. Today's telecast really diving into the issue of a solid waste management plan for the regional district of Nanaimo and their member municipalities. We'll get into issues that surround what to do with garbage and recycling, also landfill or incineration, or those options moving forward, and some future potential changes to curbside pickup. Of course, these things cost money. That's another dimension as well that we'll touch on here throughout the program. Really pleased to be joined by Larry Gardner, the manager of solid waste for the regional district of Nanaimo. Larry, thanks so much for making time for me to come on the program.
Thank you. My pleasure. Happy to be here.
This is it seems like a pretty forward-thinking document here. 20 years moving ahead on the planning stages, at least, that you guys have figured out so far here, Larry. This is seems like you guys have a lot of work to do moving ahead to come up with a plan. From your perspective, what do you see as the main issues, garbage and recycling issues for the regional district moving forward here in the Mid-Island?
Well, you touched on one of the main issues, and that's the finances. So how do we finance our program? So as largely within this regional district, it's a user pay system. So pretty much, not quite entirely, but largely our user fees, tipping fees, that we receive at the landfill finance our waste management program, running the landfill, the transfer station, our regulatory work, the waste management planning, cleanup, illegal dumping, all of those activities. As less waste comes in, and a bit of a I guess creature, or challenge with our own success. As we get more diversion, less waste comes in, we receive less revenue, and we still have to finance all of our services, all of our programs. So it becomes a progressive challenge to be able to do that, and that's one of the significant issues that we have.
All right, and another aspect of this, of the plan, it comes down to capacity for the landfill. Just over 20 years remaining on the shelf life there, I understand, Larry, that the landfill on Cedar Road, which takes all the region's landfill from the transfer station in Parksville and in Nanaimo down to that landfill in Cedar. So that kind of fits into the equation too, doesn't it, Larry?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you're right, and I don't have the figures in front of me, but 20 years is approximately right. I think it's the current projections are a little bit more than that. I guess the landfill's kind of like a roof. You can always get one more year out of it. But that's the kind of time frame we're looking at, which in terms of residual waste management, disposal, we're still getting to the point, although that is a ways out, we still need to plan for what do we plan to do post landfill, post that 20 years. So that's part of the exercise we're working on now, is what are the options for us beyond the life of this landfill, and what's this community interested in doing, or amenable or acceptable to.
Now, have you gotten to the phase yet where a decision has been made on the landfill? Do we expand it? Do we partner maybe with a neighboring regional district? I know that's been batted around a little bit as an idea. The actual landfill on Cedar Road, has that sort of been decided on, hey, we're going to stick with landfilling, maybe something else? Where does that stand, Larry?
No decisions have been made on that. Just to back up a little bit to explain the planning process, and I think that'll set a bit of a picture on where we're at. The planning process is a three-stage process. So the original plan was done in the early 90s. I believe the last amendment to the solid waste management plan was 2004. So now we're 10 years further down the road, and it's a time to relook at where we're, what have we done to date, where are we going in the future. So it's a three-stage process. First stage is, what have you been doing, where are you at? And we've gone through that exercise and really looked at it and said, well, what we said we were going to do in 2004, we've largely accomplished. We did what we planned to do, so now we're looking at what's the next horizon. So the second stage, which is where we're at. So first stage is where were you? Second stage is what are the options? What do you want to do for the future? What are the options in front of you, and what's the preferred option or options? And then really the third phase is just, okay, well, how are we going to finance it? How do we schedule this? And how do we implement? And that's kind of that is the phases of the plan. So we have reviewed where we were in the past. Right now we're starting to get to identify what are all of our challenges and start to build on, well, what are our options for the future? So you asked about, life beyond the landfill? Could we work with neighbors? Yeah, that's one of the options that we need to kick around. Are we open to working with some of our neighboring communities or communities within the island, or broader than that, the Lower Mainland or beyond? Are we amenable to waste export to the U.S. or to the Lower Mainland? Are we open to incineration? Are we open to waste to energy? Are we willing, open to doing that with some of the other jurisdictions? Those are all questions that we're starting to tackle through the solid waste management plan.
And I understand there's a public engagement process too to get some opinions coming up via this solid waste advisory committee that's been set up. Sort of put some feelers out in the community, Larry, to find out, hey, where do people sit on some of these pretty big and potentially controversial issues?
Absolutely. So a key piece of that is developing a solid waste advisory committee, and we have, I believe it's 26 members, and they're the representatives of the public and of agencies, and it'll include member municipalities, some of the provincial agencies like Ministry of Environment, and the Health Authority, and the agency people. They're really more there for resource, and then a fairly significant public component, really to gauge what the public sentiment is. So that committee exists throughout the planning process. We did have a committee in place for the first stage of the process. We've kind of revamped it as we've moved into stage 2. So that's a key part of the public communication. The earlier stage, that's really more communication out. This is where we're at, this is what we're doing. As we move through the planning process, we need to move less from communication out to more of a dialogue to what's community interested in, what are their sentiments, and that's one of the key activities the planning committee is helping us with, or what are the important messages that we need to go out to the broader community to get some feedback on.
Now, how much weight will be put on what the public has to say in relation to this plan and what's ultimately brought together and brought to the board for potential approval? I guess that's the million-dollar question, but, but you're saying you're going out to the community. One would assume that there's going to be somewhat of a public wrinkle on this plan moving forward, Larry.
Fabulous question. So the planning processes work. I've been involved in liquid and solid waste management planning for much of my career in other areas of the province, and it's I'm amazed how well it works, because when you actually bring a group to the table, they're well informed, they tend to make collective decisions. Collective thinking works, and they tend to make good decisions, good recommendations. As you mentioned, the regional board has the ultimate decision, but as well, the regional board represents a community. So it's really just a means to inform the board and to be accurate in what the community's desires are. And if you do a good job through the planning process and you actually present what the community wants and trying to get that balance or consensus on what the majority of the people in the community want, it tends to get supported at the political level. So in my experience, these planning exercises work tremendously well.
Coming up on the other side of the break, we'll learn a little bit more about this solid waste management plan and also landfilling or incineration, a bunch of different forms of waste to energy incineration. Some people don't like it here in the mid-Vancouver Island region. We'll learn a little bit more about what that technology is and if that potentially could be coming to the Mid-Island area. More here on Head On with Larry Gardner from the RDN after this break. Ian Holmes back on Shaw TV here. This is Head On, examining the issues that really matter here on Mid-Vancouver Island. Larry Gardner, he is the manager of solid waste for the regional district of Nanaimo. We'll get to landfill and incineration. That's a hot topic here in a couple of minutes. I want to learn a little bit more here about the solid waste management plan. You mentioned we're in the process now of identifying what the issues are, getting this committee together, reaching out to the public. I wanted a little bit more information on that engagement with the public? Are there going to be open houses coming up, or what happens in that aspect of things to collect some public feedback?
Short answer, yes, there will be some open houses. Right now, we're putting together our public consultation plan, and it includes everything from newsletters, media to open houses. It will depend a little bit on, as we get down our options choices. If we are to tackle things that are more controversial, those will take more dialogue with the community. So we kind of need to get through the exercise of going, what are the options, what are we looking at, what's the preferred, and at that point we'll really know how and what we're taking out to the community. So it might be open houses, it might be even some meeting with some specific stakeholders, such as waste haulers or others in the waste management business, because some of the policies might affect them more so than they would just the broader public.
Okay, and do you have a sort of a general timeline on when you hope to have your whole package together and going towards the board? I'd had hoped that we were going to be well through the plan getting towards this spring. Things have slowed down a little bit, so short answer is no, we haven't set a firm timeline, but I'm hoping that largely we can be through kind of the assessment options by the end of this spring. Again, it depends a little bit on how challenging some of the issues we are. The more conversation we need to have with the community, the longer that takes, and that will delay some of finalizing a plan. One of those issues that may take a little more examination is incineration and landfilling. Our next topic in the program here, Larry, I definitely intrigued a little, want to learn a little bit more, and your expert opinion on. We'll start with incineration. Waste to energy incineration is something that We Liberator, a company based out of the States, looked at potentially setting up a facility south of Nanaimo. The regional district of Nanaimo board last year saying, hey, we're not interested in that right now. But this is on the table, isn't it, Larry, moving ahead as a potential option, at least to examine the possibility of waste to energy incineration. What is your opinion on this relatively new form of technology, at least to British Columbia?
Well, actually, it's new to British Columbia. There has been incinerator.
There's one plant, I believe.
There's a facility in Burnaby that's been there for at least a decade or more. But yeah, there isn't a lot in British Columbia. So waste to energy incineration. So there's two traditional ways to manage residual waste: landfill or some kind of thermal processing, which traditionally used to be incineration. It was basically just burned. That's morphed to waste to energy, where actually it's being used now as a fuel source to create energy. But it's still a thermal process, right? You're using heat to destroy the material. There is, I think there's many places it has very good application. There's others where landfill may be preferable, and it can depend on land space, attitudes of the community, maybe different uses for the materials that would be used as a fuel. So one of the concerns that is often brought forward is if you pull a lot of the high BTU materials out of the waste stream, so polyethylene bottles, for example, and you recycle those and use them for higher level use, the more and more high BTU material you pull out, what's left to actually use as a fuel source? So that's one concern. Waste energy facilities are very, very high capital cost. Landfills tend to be a little bit more easier to phase in, phase out, and adjust for increases or decreases in the waste stream, whereas waste energy facilities, you're putting all your capital up front, and many people raise a concern, well, if you build this very high capital project, then you actually need to have enough material to actually feed it. So those are all of the challenges. Is there an obvious solution or answer for any particular community? In my mind, no, there's not. And I think those are all of the kind of questions that need to get weighed. And again, that's part of what we'll be doing through the planning exercise. And a lot of it will get, some direction or feedback from our advisory committee on how far we need to go down that path. Yeah.
So on the incineration side, you mentioned that this is a high capital, it's fairly expensive, and you need a lot of material to feed this thing in order to have it kind of make sense. That would lead one to believe that a partnership with a neighboring regional district would be necessary. It doesn't sound like this is something that the RDN would go it alone, based on how you sort of frame that, Larry. Is that safe to say?
Based on the amount of waste we generate in this community within the regional district, it would be highly unlikely that we would have enough volume to support the capital investment. So yeah, you're correct. If that was to happen, to my mind, we'd have to partner with someone else to go ahead and do that.
And how much of an appetite is that, either to the north or the south of us, neighboring communities that may be interested in partnering on something like this? Have you gone that far down the road here, Larry?
No, I know, and I've only been with regional district for a year. I know historically there was a tri-regional study that looked at options for managing waste. This was done a number of years ago with some of our neighboring communities, and I believe that incineration was one of the things they considered as well. So I know there's been some, I guess, bottom line, there's been some discussion a number of years ago, and I do get this sense there was some appetite for maybe some cooperation, but nothing as of recent, and it'll really depend on, again, is that something that our community wants us to go out and engage with our neighbors to, share in how we might manage residual waste in the future? Okay.
And on the landfilling side, you mentioned, and I hope you can expand a little bit more, Larry, that this is, I guess, it is. There's a lot of it's an easier solution in a sense to have a landfill. Is that because it's what we've always done, or just explain that a little bit more? You mentioned,
easier.
Yeah.
If you're siting a landfill or siting an incinerator, they're probably somewhat on par in terms of challenge to locate something new. So not to suggest a landfill is simpler or easier, but where there is one, or where you are able to site one, they tend to be more flexible in adjusting to waste flow. So, for example, with the landfill we have now, if we saw a significant reduction in the amount of waste going to that landfill, it would be fairly easy for us to, through diversion, for example, it'd be fairly easy for us to scale down to accommodate that. Or if we did see an economic boom and we saw much more coming in, we could accommodate an increase as well. With some of the opponents to waste to energy, one of the raised that once you build this high capital facility, it's not as flexible about adjusting to flow. You really need that mass of material coming in to basically pay for that capital investment.
Is shipping, say, by barge some excess garbage or other materials over to Washington State or just over to the mainland, is that an option, or is this going to be handled, our problems going to be handled internally, Larry?
No, again, that's a question that we need to wrestle with as well. So if we are to work with neighbors' communities, is that just on the island, or do we go beyond that? You mentioned Washington State or Oregon. And is that practical? Yes, it is. We're seeing waste now. There are a couple of waste management companies in the area that do ship routinely down to the U.S. There are two very large landfills, one in Washington State and one in Oregon. They're in the order of 50 to 100 times larger than the site here. So they can operate, their operating cost is much lower because unit cost for waste, for every ton they bring in, it does not cost them the same to process because they're such a massive operation, just economy of scale. So they can operate, their disposal or their gate fee for waste coming in the door is somewhere around the $25 to $30 a ton, whereas right now our tip fee is $125 a ton. So there is quite a difference in cost. You still need to get the material there, though.
Before I let you go here, we'll move on to our last commercial break in a second here, but I'm wondering about just getting out the proper, correct information on incineration and landfilling out to the public. Do you see that as the RDN's role to say, hey, these are the two technologies, and try to get the best correct, unbiased information out as possible? Because there's all kinds of different opinions amongst the environmentalists on this side, that side about information. Sometimes it's difficult to ascertain as to what is correct. Do you see that as the RDN's role, or how would you assess that side of things? Because there's opinions that fly left, right, and center on this issue.
I'm challenged actually a little bit with an answer for that. Is it the RDN's role? Yeah, absolutely it is, to inform, to try to inform people of what the options before them are. But some decisions may be just even out of principle. If this community is not interested in waste to energy, from a principle point of view, then does it add any value to try to use a environmental argument to or discuss the environmental perspectives if somebody, if it's really more of a principle that that we're not going down a particular path.
We'll take a break, Larry. We'll be back with the final topic. This will be very interesting, learning more about future changes in curbside pickup with evolving technology. How will this affect garbage pickup outside your front door? More on Head On Shaw TV right after this. Final segment here on the program. I'm Ian Holmes alongside Larry Gardner. He's the manager of solid waste for the regional district of Nanaimo, talking about the future of garbage and also recycling collection and how to handle our waste here on Mid-Vancouver Island. Changes in curbside pickup, Larry. Technology is evolving. We could have some changes. Sounds like 5 years out or beyond here. But from your perspective here on the Mid-Island, Nanaimo Oceanside regions, what kinds of changes could we be seeing in how people's trash and recyclables are picked up outside their doorsteps? So
you mentioned probably won't see change for a few years, 5 years or so. Within the regional district of Nanaimo, the waste is collected through contract to Progressive Waste Systems, and we still have a number of years left in that contract. So I don't really see anything's changing in the short term. And by the way, the city of Nanaimo runs their own collection program as well, so it is a little bit different than what is provided to people in the regional district and other member municipalities. At any rate, what we see as a trend with curbside collection is away from garbage personnel, right? Yeah. Collecting bins and manually lifting them and placing them in trucks. It's a fairly high hazard job. So not just from injury from repetitive activity from lifting. There has nationally or internationally been a number that have actually been of fatalities or fairly serious injuries due to being actually hit by vehicles. Keep in mind, these guys are working in traffic all the time. They're in and out of their trucks all the time. So it poses both the risk to injury from vehiculars, traffic, but as well from, worker injury. So the trend for that for curbside collection has been to go to more automated systems. So it's likely right now with the regional district, it is a manual collection system. We collect, it's a two-stream collection. So, organics and recyclables 1 week, and then your organics and your garbage the other week. But it is a manual collection. So if we go to an automated in the future, because that's the way the trend is going in the business.
And that's the big arm coming down, picking it up, and dumping it in the truck, right?
Exactly. So what does that mean? What does that mean to our system? Well, potentially, with any change, there's also potential for some opportunity as well. So can we make some changes to our system that might actually improve or provide greater convenience for people? So, for example, we've got the blue box and yellow bag. If we were to go to an automated, is there a potential that there would be less need for separation, that you could put the materials in a single container? Also, would it be a system that's more amenable to yard waste collection? That's one of the inquiries or interests we hear.
Which isn't done now in any...
No, it's just the food waste right now. Mm-hmm. So would an automated system allow us to do changes to the services that may provide more convenience for people? There's also some ability when you go to automated systems to actually put like barcodes on containers. So it actually allows you to have better information. You can actually find weights and whatever for what you collect. So it provides you some better data on where the waste and where it's coming from, how much. So do you adjust education programs or some of your other programs to encourage better diversion? So with any change, there's some opportunity, and on the curbside front, there's a potential. We're seeing the trend and thinking, well, a good likelihood that we'll have, we'll end up following suit, because that's the way the world's changing. So we're also thinking, is there some opportunity there? Again, another discussion for our solid waste management plan, because the more add-ons you do to any service do come with an associated cost. So if we are to start making our, add more things to our service, there's probably a cost, and people need to be aware of that, and we need to pick the one that best fits our community.
Before we wrap up, I'm wondering if a better garbage or recycling collection service can be provided with an automated system over manual. Is from what you've seen, is this like a surety that yes, this is a better service by having machines as opposed to manual labor doing this job, Larry? I'm kind of intrigued to see what the answer is to that.
Yeah, great question. Better, with anything, there's, pros, cons. So right now, I believe part of the success in the regional district is we have, a fairly small can limit that you pay for with your utility bill, but you do have the option to get bag tags. And you can throw your $2 sticker on your additional bag of garbage and it'll get picked up. Well, if you went to an automated system, you really wouldn't have the ability to put an additional bag out with your container, because how would that automated arm, you can't pick up the bag. So that actually might detract from the service we can provide, but possibly we could offset that by having maybe 3 different container size, which is what's done in many communities, and you actually will pay for a service depending on the size of the can. Different service, is it better or not? Some people might see that preferable, others might see it as as a detraction from what they have.
Interesting stuff. Larry, thanks so much for coming on the program. Larry Gardner, he's the manager of solid waste for the Regional District of Nanaimo. Really appreciate your time.
More than welcome.
And thanks for tuning in. A lot of very interesting issues here on the table on garbage and recycling, landfilling or incineration. We'll hear a lot more about this from the Regional District of Nanaimo in the months ahead. Thanks so much for tuning in for another edition of Head On here on Shaw TV. I'm Ian Holmes.